Hello, listeners, and welcome to the latest episode of the AdQuick Advertising Podcast, a podcast that explores the intersection of advertising, content, creativity, all of the things that you care about. Today, we have a special guest. We have Olivia Kory. She's a seasoned marketing executive with experience in growth, performance measurement, and strategic decision-making. She's currently head of strategy at Haus, a decision science platform, and she's worked on really cool brands from Netflix and Sonos to TubeMogul. She's one of the go-to voices in the marketing space. I followed her online for years. She's actually one of the most requested people in our internal Slack channel to have on the show. So Olivia, welcome.
Thank you, Adam. That's flattering. I'm a big fan of yours. I actually have a story I can tell you about when I learned about AdQuick and how excited I was.
Oh, okay, we should start with that.
Well, so yeah, I was in LA and I was in a role at Netflix in 2018-ish that had me buying a lot of out of home, a lot of billboards. It was like a talent heavy role. So all of the billboards that you see in LA and New York was a big part of my role. And then I moved over to Quibi after Netflix. So was putting together some media plans, and I was introduced to AdQuick from our chief of staff, who I think we shared investors with. And I was like, oh my gosh, this would have saved me so much time. Like, I remember in the moment at Netflix, I was like, this industry is just screaming for disruption. I can't believe all of my other channels are on these timelines, and then print and out of home is just this incredibly inefficient manual process, and somebody needs to fix this. And so what you guys were solving for would have solved my need and like my immediate kind of pain points in the role just before at Netflix.
Totally. And so I've been here 2 years now, and as soon as I joined, I had the same epiphany about so much previous work where it was like, I just wanted like some specific units and I couldn't figure out how to just book them. Like, it was so hard. And so, yeah, I'm glad to have someone with a warm experience with us. We're obviously not trying to sell you on anything on the show. We just want to have an industry conversation, but always appreciate these stories. So Olivia, you're such a great voice online. Actually, before the show, I read just a bunch of your content and a bunch of your feeds. I see them anyway every day, but I wanted to go back and pull some things out. So I thought we could start with a recent tweet that you had that I think will spur some good discussion. So you said, and I'll summarize this: marketing will be forever a struggle between the agencies, platforms, vendors, marketers who confidently present a high volume of data points and insights, even though they might be total BS, versus the teams who present fewer, more accurate, confident, and honest insights. I love that. Sadly, I too often see leadership value the former as I cycle through agencies. Resist the urge. So this is wonderful. I'm curious, can you share some, I guess, words of wisdom for leadership and maybe why you think this is happening in the first place?
I was reflecting on some recent meetings that I've had with some of our customers at Haus and some agencies, and I think the ones I really admire are struggling right now because they're trying to present accurate, again, honest information up to the C-suite, the founders, and often, like, when you're trying to really make sure you're presenting the most meaningful insights that you can stand behind, it looks a little bare. Like, this is not going to be a 50 slide deck, which I was agency side. I remember just putting together, we just threw a bunch of stuff at the wall in terms of insights. And, it's no idea of a confidence interval around that estimate. We didn't present that type of data, but I was reflecting on the fact that I've been in the room when founders and C-suite is like underwhelmed by that marketer who's presenting the true kind of honest insights, because they're just expecting so much more. And so then I'm seeing, these agencies come in and they'll audit accounts and they'll kind of tell these founders and C-suite everything that's going wrong, and they really have no idea. Again, it's just the like information, like quantity of information, I think, that they're responding to. And I just want us to resist that urge of like, really pressure test, and you should be skeptical of the data that you're seeing. And when I think a lot of brands right now are just signing up a bunch of measurement tools, and we benefit from that, of course, but it's like more data is not necessarily better. Like in many cases, I would actually prefer fewer, more data-backed insights. So that was the genesis of that one.
Yeah, simplicity is the ultimate sophistication with metrics. And it's interesting that this is still going on because I haven't been on the agency side in like over a decade now. And I remember, when I was at my agency, we would see competing agencies come in, or not even competing, just like tangentially, tactical agencies that were working on a different part of marketing come in, and they'd always have all of these slides showing so many KPIs. And basically what would happen is, you're right, some of the team, the data nerds on that team sort of geek out on it, but I would still see the smartest marketers on the client side, like their eyes would start to gloss over. And I guess maybe the strategy was just, here's all of the numbers because this is showing all of the activity, or all of the importance that we are. Look how closely we're tracking everything, which in their mind probably makes them more comfortable, I guess, if they're just not analytics savvy. But I was hoping that would have stopped at this point, and people would be more sophisticated and present just the important metrics.
Yep. It's kind of the illusion of doing work, right? That you want to show that this agency or this team that you're paying for is doing a lot. And I often find that backfires. Like this illusion of work is actually counterproductive often when it comes to campaign management in micro optimizations of just like, hey, we're going to leave it alone. We're not going to touch it. And the performance is going to be even better than the folks who are in these platforms making changes day to day. So I think it's kind of a similar thing as the insights. It's just this constant need to kind of prove the value, but in doing so is actually counterproductive.
Yeah, and I also find being at a smaller team, there's like kind of no time for like all of these presentations with all these slides. So you just have to focus on the things really close to revenue and the things that are very important at that stage. And I think as companies get larger and they expand teams and they add agencies, it's just like this, Jevons paradox of just complexity that's added to things. And when I was at Google on the analytics team, Avinash liked to talk about, like, if you have more than three KPIs, you have too many. And, he likes to say platitudes like that, but he kind of has a point, right? Like if you have all of these metrics you're measuring, like what are you even doing with your day? It just gets to these fluffy things that may or may not matter. And the marketer can geek out over that. I actually think the marketer can look at a ton of dashboards and a ton of data, but I think like when you present it, like you were saying, this sophistication and simplicity, because you can focus the team on the right story and ultimately the one that's important for what you're doing. And I think that builds trust. I think that gets your budget increase faster than if you're just throwing a bunch of metrics. It might work if the company's in growth mode, but once you start to get people who really start getting concerned about budget and economics, like I think you're going to get cut pretty quickly.
100%. I'm often encouraging folks to simplify the KPIs that they're passing to us, like CFOs and some of the exec teams that we work with just love the simplicity of like, how did this drive sales and revenue? And we're not looking at all these other kind of vanity metrics, because you can often, like, if you're tracking 15, 20 things, you can paint a positive story about one metric that moved in the right direction. But often, like, you only care about that proxy insofar as it drove sales or it drove revenue. And so I really appreciate the simplicity of just like looking at 3 to 4 KPIs and really doing what it takes to move those and not getting distracted by all of the proxy metrics.
Totally. So I have another question based on a recent tweet, and this is really cool. 10 years ago, you planned your first incrementality test. And so you wanted to understand test power up front, ensure you're getting an accurate detect and lift. You wanted to figure out how to track user activity in the control group. You wanted to figure out how to convert cookies to households, shout out LiveRamp. And so my question is, what are a few things you've learned in the 10 years since that you wish you knew when you ran this first test?
Oh my gosh. Well, I remember that meeting the meeting that led to that incrementality test was the brand I was working with was using an MTA called Odometry, which was acquired by Google, of course, and they were investing in all of the usual suspects in terms of channels. And the MTA model said that brand paid search was far and away the best performer, and that their online video efforts were doing almost nothing. And so that, the meeting that came from that and that I tweeted about was a meeting where they were recommending, based on the MTA model, to move almost all of their online video budget into paid search, where they're already spending a fortune. And so you're like, okay, pump the brakes. And my management at the time, my bosses, educated me on correlation causation. It was the first time I'd heard of this in the world of marketing, which is surprising because that scientific method has proliferated every other industry except marketing. So they taught me why this might be happening, because I had no idea, what they were looking at in terms of MTA and why these reports may be showing them that they need to make that change. And so that was my first, the first aha moment when I realized that the system that I looked at day to day was flawed and wasn't actually really representative of the truth and the impact of marketing. That actually helped me kind of get my job at Netflix, because they were incredibly focused on this. They have kind of causal inference economists all over the company running controlled experiments in every department, and not just marketing, across the product team. So that was, I knew nothing about incrementality when I worked on that first test. And just those concepts around correlation, causation, and the flaws in a click-based attribution model actually ended up helping me get the role at Netflix, where I then was exposed to the smartest people in the world when it comes to this stuff. And so that was just a playground for learning. And, it was the type of culture and environment where failure was celebrated. The CEO would get up in front of a room and say, I was wrong. I thought we should do this. We ran a controlled experiment and it turns out that it worked super well. And he would talk about that at a company meeting. And so failure was celebrated right alongside success. And there was just, again, so much to learn, and I'm still learning about stats. So, in every kind of step, it's how to build a culture of experimentation. To me, is just as important as all of the concepts and the stats behind it.
It's funny you mentioned Odometry. I was working at Google when the analytics team acquired them, and that was the first time I visited Austin. I got to go with our VP to meet the team and talk to them about Google culture. And now I live in Austin, so it's kind of a small world. You also used to work at TubeMogul, that was the first small cap tech stock I actually bought, and they got acquired by Adobe. So thank you for that.
Awesome. Yeah. Love to hear it. They were TubeMogul was ahead of its time.
Yeah.
Those concepts I just mentioned and the Allstate work was at TubeMogul, where we were running their online video. And then, we ended up building kind of what we called an ad swap product, which was placebo testing. So this was in 2014, I believe. So really ahead of our time there. And then the other area was the idea of independence in Google. When I was there, Google pulled YouTube from the open exchange and made it such that you could only buy YouTube ads through Google directly. And we did an ad campaign about why independence matters, and how could you trust this company to sell you the ads, and then grade their own homework. And so that now all this stuff with the DOJ is looking back at these decisions they were making 10, 15 years ago, and I'm like, all right, you're a little too late here. This would have been much, I think, better to address in the moment in 2013, 2014.
For the record, I do not endorse everything Google has done. I was on the analytics team when we removed everyone's keywords from Google Analytics, and I got hate mail from that for years after I left Google. People were sending me nastygrams about keywords in search. So yeah, they're an interesting company. I still love them. I know a lot of people there, so I always hope they do the right things for the web. That's all I can hope.
Yeah. I mean, based on my Twitter, sometimes I think folks think I'm anti-Google. My husband actually works at Google as well. And so I'm rooting for Google. And I think YouTube is one of the best places to buy ads. So very, very pro Google. I think, there's this, I think there's this misnomer that, like you shouldn't buy Google, but I think Google is probably one of the best places you can buy ads. You just really need to validate what you're getting and where you're getting it in terms of the mix within the universe.
We totally have something in common. My wife still works at Google.
Oh, wow. Did you meet there?
No, she was at a startup and they were acquired. And then she actually got recruited as a contractor. And she's one of the rare people that got promoted from contractor to FTE, which is actually kind of hard at Google, especially for her role. So it's fun. I'm the one on the startup side and having I'd like to say I have economic problems and she has political problems in marketing. And it's, everyone has economic problems, but it's just not the same at a big company. It's like, you're mostly dealing with politics and getting resources for things. Whereas here in startup land, we are just trying to get users and, get the machine going.
Yep. But they're kind of what affords us the ability to take risk. I'm very much rooting for Google, and I very much appreciate the stability of a company like Google because, we then can go take bets here and there and feel kind of secure as a family.
Totally. And I think also Google is fun for me for a while, and then it got to be too big, and I'm making less money at a startup, but I'm having more fun. And that's like a weird sentence for a lot of people. Like they wouldn't understand that. Of course, equity upside, but the point is for the right personality, like the big company is just like kind of slowly kills your soul. And some people can do it. But if you're someone who's like, you just can't sit in meetings all day, it's just going to be a nightmare for you. If you're listening to this and you're, on the agency side or the small startup side, and you're dreaming of, this cushy life at a big company, it's not always as great as it sounds. So,
yeah, we have a lot of former big tech folks at Haus as well, and they'll always ask me about the differences. I've ping ponged between big and small companies in my career as well, and the one thing I will say is it is so hard. Like startups are so hard, but the thing that keeps me going is that you can see the effect of that hard work so clearly. Like I can see the impact that I'm making every single day in an early stage startup. And that's what I always often felt was missing in terms of like fulfillment in a big company like a Google is like, I could be gone tomorrow and this whole work stream could be gone tomorrow and they would be no different. And in fact, in some cases, they might be better off. And so that was always, but again, I've been like really burned out and I've been exhausted from startups. And sometimes you're at a stage of your career where you're okay with a little bit less pressure and not being in the cooker at all times. So, you just have to go in with it eyes wide open and really kind of understand what you want and what drives you in fulfillment.
Yeah, and measurement at the startup is easier because you were talking about, if you're gone, everything's the same. With any attribution at a startup, you know exactly what you did and what you implemented. And so there's no questions. Whereas at a large company with a marketing team of 50 people, it's like there's definitely, attribution questions where different groups are saying, it was us. Oh, it was us. And I've seen some of those fights before, less at tech, more at like consumer brands that aren't like natively analytics savvy. But at the startup, like you said, all of the results of your efforts are apparent and attributable, and you can celebrate them. Or, if you're at a B2B company and not generating enough leads, they're going to come to you, and it's going to be a discussion where there's no blame. Like it's the buck stops with you.
100%.
So you've mentioned having an incrementality problem is actually a good thing in business. Do you want to elaborate on this concept and like why it's a positive indicator?
Yep. Sometimes when we have a brand come in and they get a poor incrementality result, I'm like, congratulations, you have an incrementality problem. And to kind of go back and explain this, brands who don't have product market fit, who don't have a ton of organic demand, are likely leaning pretty heavily on paid ads to grow. And that's not a great place to be. It's going to make it when your business is 80-90% driven by paid media, it gets very expensive, and often just the economics don't work. And so we see incrementality as you're just starting off. We're talking about startups, so everything's incremental. Everything you do is incremental because the baseline is so low. But then these brands hit this moment where product market fit starts to take off. Organic demand is growing, word of mouth is growing. And that is often the point at which they start to spend more on marketing. And it's really hard to disentangle. All right, our spend went up at the exact same time everything else started to take off around our business. And so that's when you really, I'd say, like, the incrementality starts to get fuzzy of like, all right, we dialed up marketing, but our business is doing well. What's causing what here? And so when we have brands come in and they'll test with us, and meta ads won't be as incremental as they think, I try to reorient them of like, you've built a really great business. You've built a business that has other growth levers and really happy customers and product market fit. And I learned this at Quibi because we had come from Netflix, where, as I mentioned, we're looking at everything on incrementality. We were running holdouts, and it was really hard to drive users and subscribers on top of all the organic demand and the word of mouth. It was just there's so much happening in that business when I was there naturally. And so we started at Quibi, and we were seeing, a very high percentage of users coming in from paid. And what I learned there is that actually was the signal of like not having product market fit. And so that's why, just to kind of go back, that's why I often say this is a luxury. And it's a sign of a very healthy business if paid is really only driving, a percentage of your overall volume.
So along those lines, you've talked about the importance of upper funnel marketing, including out of home. And I think in the world that we're creating of AI and people asking for answers and people going to their friends for recommendations, all this upper funnel marketing, I think, is just going to matter more and more. I think we're having a return to brand, and performance is still going to matter, but I think it's going to matter less. But regardless of that, how do you recommend for today and into the future, marketers start to think about the allocation between brand and performance, especially with search going away? Just any thoughts you have here? This is like an existential yin yang that marketers always think about.
Yep. I have a question for you. I'm really curious what you would say here. What is the role of brand marketing? How would you define it?
The role of brand marketing is definitely, just to have people aware you exist, is the very simplistic answer. So, no matter where someone is on the, scale of understanding your reputation, of knowing your team, of knowing your products, I think brand reinforces all of those things. It's an introduction, but it's also a nurture path. And it also can be, performance oriented and be conversion with the right call to action. So, it can be all of these things. It depends on the company stage. It depends how large you are. Obviously different for Coke than a smaller D2C startup. But it's a lot of things, right?
Yep. I ask because it does seem like there's this rift in the industry amongst people who believe brand marketing is only important so far as it's driving sales. And then there's the folks, I'd say, similar camp as you, of like, this is awareness media. The role of this brand campaign is to drive awareness and to fill the funnel such that my performance efforts become more efficient. And that's why brand just keeps getting kind of like whipped around, is like, there's this group of folks who believe brand is only important insofar as it's driving sales, and then they don't see immediate sales, and then they cut it or they move it. And it's just, I think you really need to understand like why you're doing it. And if you need it to be driving sales, you need to construct the media or the setup in a way where you can actually understand that. because it's so hard to do. And so I don't call it brand marketing because I think it does drive sales. I do. I think it is actually making an impact. And I think you're kind of undervaluing it if you call it brand, because I think a lot of these channels and a lot of these tactics can actually meaningfully improve a business. So I don't know, like I'm still myself trying to better articulate how to think about these different channels, but I kind of put out of home in the same bucket as these view-based mediums like OTT, like YouTube, where you don't have a kind of immediate option to go click on the ad and convert, and they are so often undervalued. And we run a lot of out-of-home tests. It's been fun. Often the markets that you're buying in are fixed. So there are like a little challenges there where it's like, well, if you're only buying New York and LA, it's going to be hard to find like some comparable markets that behave just like New York and LA. But regardless, like we see that these channels can have, like they can have an impact on sales if you are looking at it in the right way and you're kind of moving off of attribution. So I don't know. I think a lot of folks sell it short of like, if you move off of click-based models, you'll be surprised by how much lifting it's really doing.
Yeah, and to be clear, I think all marketing is done with sales in mind at some point. Otherwise, why are we here? And I actually get frustrated with marketers who, it's great if you win an award and get industry recognition. I love that. If it gives you vibes and it makes your team hype, by all means. But at the end of the day, we are here to, grow a company and make money. And so the thing is for brand, you don't want to sell to people directly. You're just going to annoy them. And so like no one wants to buy from someone who's really pushy. And so the reason I asked the question is just because like mentally marketing teams do bucket in terms of brand or performance. But like you, I want to tag the brand to performance in this just dialed back way where we're looking at it over time. If you're going to grow a $1 billion company, you're not going to do it all through ads that say buy this right now, right? You're just going to annoy everyone. Maybe if you're selling funny t-shirts, you can do that. But if you're selling like real things or a larger price tag item, it's like almost off-putting if you were to treat it like you would someone who has something of a very transactional nature. So I think a lot of startups get away from that and don't do all of the work of brand. And maybe an interesting example is things like the D2C startups that are winning, that are even selling cheap goods, like Liquid Death. Liquid Death has a cool brand, right? Like they're not trying to do a lot of stuff to get you to click something and buy a Liquid Death online. It's never going to happen, right? That whole purchase happens at the store, and the vibes they're creating have impossibly to measure lift. I mean, they can measure it insofar as the success of their company, and it's all of it is attributed to marketing. It's just water, right? It's like the most perfectly competitive good. So when people say that brand doesn't work, I'm like, well, I don't think you understand what's going on here. Of course it works. You're just looking for it. Like you said, last click attribution, never going to happen. The other frustrating thing, and we can talk about this a little bit, is I saw that Ahrefs and SparkToro published research that said around 50%, around half of searches in Google were branded, had a brand term of some sort. And it's funny because that only happened because people knew about the brand. And so that's high intent, high value traffic. And of course, the search team will try to take credit, but really that effort, all of like the brand search traffic is a proxy metric for all of the work you're doing through out of home, through YouTube, through TV, through, whatever else is just warming that customer and creating that relationship and that awareness.
We have brands who come to us and, they'll be spending 10, 20, $30 million in performance marketing. And most of that is sitting in brand paid search, just based on the Google Analytics last click report. So yeah, painfully aware of that dynamic. And again, you're just, you're really losing sight of like the things that are really meaningfully moving the business. And often it is those brand efforts and the really thoughtful, like intentional work behind like, how they made Liquid Death the brand that it is.
Our spouses are making money off of all of the marketers that just keep pouring brand dollars to Google.
Oh my goodness. Well, one dynamic we've noticed is if you do turn off brand search or paid search and you sell on Amazon, like they might move from potentially buying on your D2C site into Amazon. And so that might be a reason, like depending on the margins and where you actually want to drive those users. I'm coming to around to the idea that if you want and you like it is a priority for you to grow the direct business for margin related reasons, that maybe you do keep it on. So
Olivia, I have one more question to wrap things up. I ask a lot of our guests this because I think this is so important. You're such a accomplished marketer. You're super impressive. What words of wisdom would you have for young people listening to this and being like, Olivia is so great. How do I follow that career? Or even like, what could I learn from her for my own personal success in startups, at big companies, however you want to take this?
It's a great question. I have to go back to Netflix and kind of the DNA of the company there and the culture around feedback. You've worked at Google. I've heard it at many large companies that the idea of like performance reviews where you're soliciting feedback from peers and from your managers is just like, you need to say the things that are going to help your friend get promoted. And so you end up just kind of like sugarcoating all the feedback that goes in. And Netflix was the exact opposite. Like you don't want to say anything bad in that review because you don't want to hurt their chances of moving up in their career. But at Netflix, it was like feedback is, and this sounds so cheesy, but feedback is truly a gift. Like, and I wasn't prepared for it when I entered the company. Once a year, you can kind of go into this tool and they called it 360. You can go in and give feedback to anyone at the company at any level, including the CEO. And so you would open up that tool and you would see all the feedback you got. And it wasn't tied at all to bonus or performance or comp. It was like purely meant to make you better at your job. And I remember reading it and it was like very direct feedback. And now looking back, that feedback that I got is like, I think responsible for some pretty transformational kind of moments in my career. And it's like the shining the mirror on you in terms of learning the things that, not anyone might say to you head on. And so I would just be open to feedback and think about it through that perspective in terms of that being a gift. And those are you want people around you who are willing to shine lights on some of those aspects of where you need to improve.
I love that. So for our final segment, I lied. We have one more question. Tell us about Haus.io and where people should go to learn more and also connect with you online.
Yeah, so not a lot of people know where the origins of the name Haus, but the idea here is we wanted to help you bring measurement capabilities in-house into your organization and enable marketers to run experiments, run rigorous holdout experiments without needing data science and without needing external partners. So the origins of the name, and then in terms of what we do, we help brands measure incrementality. Incrementality is a buzzword. We are kind of like firmly rooted in experimentation, having the holdout group or the counterfactual to understand what would have happened anyway, such that we can establish causation. And so we make it, that stuff's really hard to do. At Netflix, we had a huge team of data scientists. And the idea is like, what if we could automate that as SaaS? And so we have a tool where you can log in and you can create an experiment across any platform, online, offline, out of home included. And then you can set that up and look at results in a pretty short window of time as compared to other methods that take long, months perhaps to get results. So it's a little bit about Haus. It's what we're doing. really excited about the movement toward incrementality. I think the industry is shifting in the direction I've, always wanted to see it move. And yeah, Haus.io is our website. Reach out to me directly, and I'm always down to chat.
Awesome. We will put links to Haus and also where to connect to Olivia in the episode notes. Thank you, everyone, for listening. We will see you next week with another episode.